Welcome back, Pirate Crew. It's your captain, Yeehaw Yadam, and similarly to our red in-depth profile that we did on the previous video, we're going to go ahead and look at Victor's first place Niagara Falls deck profile for Eustass Captain Kid. Now, congratulations to Victor being the first Eustass winner of the Treasure Cups, right? I do believe there will be a little bit more, but congratulations to him. Super awesome accomplishment, nail-biting finals, and I really enjoyed the commentary that was done by Carta Magica. You guys rock. So thank you guys for providing that content for us. It was extremely enjoyable to watch. And now let's talk about how we can improve this deck list together. So once again, you can go ahead and look at the YouTube videos for Victor's deck profile, his how he talks about it, what he thinks about the deck, and so on and so forth. But I definitely think that, again, like with everything, there could be some improvements as well as personal changes. And being a One Piece content creator that looks at analyzing the One Piece card game, I do think I have a little bit of a 2 cents that I can go ahead and talk about in this video. So once again, congratulations to Victor, and let's get right into the analysis. So I want to talk about this little section right here in terms of now that he has 2 searchers. I didn't do this with the red profile because you have Nami, which is your 1 searcher. So you're going to just have basically Straw Hats. You're not going to have anything that's not a Straw Hat except for like Otama, as well as Shanks and the film cards. But the majority of your deck is just Straw Hat, and nothing else is a searcher, so there's no point in talking about it. But since we played both Bonnie and Momonosuke, there is something to be said about the amounts that we are playing. We are playing 32 Supernovas as well as 19 Wano. And if you looked at the podcast as well as the Road to Treasure Cup, the amount that you want for searchers is 18. So once you look at this number down here, you have to minus it by 1 by the initial searcher, whether it be Bonnie or Momo, and then that's the amount of Wano cards or Supernovas that you have. So he is in the right amount with 18 Wano Country cards. So excellent. He's at the, well, I want to say the right amount, but the bare minimum for consistent searching ability, which is pretty solid. So let's talk about the deck in its totality apart from that. So we're playing 3 Momos, which is awesome. I do like Momo in green. I know that a lot of green decks were just playing Supernova only, and respect. You know, nothing wrong with that, but I do believe that by adding Momo, we have a secondary value engine, right? We have, not only do we have the Bonnie as the field spell searcher, we have Momo as a field spell searcher. So if you don't have the Bonnie, you have the Momo, and Momo searches quite a couple important cards, aka Cat Vipers, Izos, and Paradise Waterfall. I'm not going to include Raizo because Raizo is his own value engine that you don't really need to play Momo to play Raizo, because Raizo, every turn he is a field spell draw card, right? If you want to look at it that way. So this is a tertiary value engine that is just, again, good in the green matchup. The more cards that you can have in hand, the easier it is to defend Eustass Captain Kid. That's kind of like the bottom line, right? And that's why I believe adding Momo as well as Raizos do help you theoretically in the green matchup. Now there's a bunch of cards here that, you know, are good for the green matchup and cards that are good for other matchups as well. So we'll go ahead and talk about them. So there's a couple cards here that I will just say, and just like the red video, are just like, they're just, you cannot, we just have a limited card pool and they just cannot be removed if you're playing a green deck whatsoever. Those cards being, I'm going to remove Momo, sorry brother, Beji, Bonnie, Cat Viper, Izo, Oppo, Okiku, Eustass Captain Kids, Basil Hawkins, Laws. And we'll go ahead and remove everything else. Now the killers being at 4 is not necessary, but you definitely some killers and Raizo, right? These are the cards that I would say you cannot move away from when you're playing a Eustass Captain Kid deck. You physically can't, right? Maybe 3 of this is too much. I'll leave them at 1. We'll talk about this and this as well. But these cards right here, those numbers just feel right to me. You can obviously play 4 laws, 2 laws, 1 law, however you want to go ahead and do it. But personally, I have found that 3 laws as well as 2 Basil Hawkins, chef's kiss, bro. What a nice little amount of cards there. There's also somebody said about going triple Hawkins, but you know, we'll get there when we get there. So we'll just go away from the full screen mode and just go down, go all the way and go back to green, right? Oh, I've done this twice. So the cards that he was playing that, you know, we'll go ahead back, Killer, Momos. Something to be said about Sachi's is kind of interesting, so I'll go ahead and include him in the conversation. Beppos, Raizo, something to be said about X-Drake, Paradise, Punk, Yamato. These are just cards that we can go ahead and talk about, ignoring completely OPO2, very exciting stuff. OPO3, very exciting stuff. And then back to our homies. This Killer, and this gentleman, and this gentleman, right? These are all cards that we'll talk about, so we'll go back to full screen mode, right? So Momos, 3 is what Victor went ahead and did, but I'm just going to go ahead and 4. I do just like heavy consistency. I think that there were some spots where we can go ahead and, change some numbers around to really make our matchups just a little bit more clean. So by going and putting this up to 4, we just make our Cat Viper and our Ezos more consistent, as well as our Paradise Waterfalls. And I do want to add in Yamatos, right? So by adding these cards, we want to increase our counts of Momos. And I think Momo is a very important card. Now you think to yourself, Yadam, what does Momo really search? And I'm gonna be real with y'all. He adds a 2K, which is very important, just like Bonnie can. But this is not just a 2K that does nothing, aka Oppo. Scratchman, as much as you are cool, my guy, you legitimately have no effect. This might as well have just been a vanilla, right? But Ezo has a very playable effect, and in combination with Trafalgar Law, you can play Ezo, Law, back the Ezo, and now you have a 2K that did something and got added back to your hand. As well as the fact that Cat Viper and Ezo are some of the most pivotal cards in the mirror match, right? These are the cards that when you do your big Eustass Captain Kid turns, you are, as people said in the comment section, creating the wall, the Chinese, or the Great Chinese Wall, or the Wall of China, whatever they wanted to call it. Basically, you're playing very defensive. Protect the kid. And you do that by playing a majority of weenie blockers and cards in hand. But Ezo goes ahead and suspends the blockers, which then allows your captain to go ahead and delete them or KO them by battle. And then slowly but surely, over the course of a couple turns, the kid will fall. And then that's when you really have the way to win the game. So definitely Ezo and Cat Viper are some of the most important cards in the game, as well as Paradise Waterfall. And that's why we really want to play the Momo as much as possible. And the Yamato is just a really clean card that can end the game, right? It's very good in green matchups because if this card, you put a lot of Dawn under it, you swing, they must counter out of this card. And it's just a threat, right? Because the way the green matchup works, the more you hit their life, the more cards they have. And more often than not, they will let you hit them all the way down to 2, hit them down to 1, and then they'll play the Eustass Captain 8 drop, and then from there they kind of take the game and they swing it back in their favor. If you don't go ahead and attack their life, which some hands allow you to do, if you have more Ezos or Cat Vipers in your hand, you do not have to hit life. You can interact with the board, which is so much better. But if you have Yamato, you can do that board interaction and life interaction at the same time, forcing your opponent to deal and remove cards from hand to not only protect their board, to protect their life, because if Yamato triggers just once, it just gets you closer and closer to winning. So I do think that Yamato at some capacity is very, very powerful, specifically in the mirror match. Versus red, this is kind of just a 1K pitch. Versus purple, this is very, very strong if you can board it late in the game. And versus blue, you've already won that matchup because you're the A drop, right? As much as that sounds like cap, more often than not, you're very favored in that matchup. So that's why I want to play Momo at 4. Beji is non-negotiable. Bonnie's non-negotiable. I'm going to put this at, at 2 for now. Obviously, maxing out on this makes your game plan of protecting the Eustass Captain Kid much more favorable. But let's just leave him at 2 for now because I do expect him to go either to 3 or to 4. Let's just see how much space we have. I am an enjoyer of 4 Vipers, 4 Ezo, 4 Scratchman. I do not like Killer, but I will place him at some amounts because it just helps you get to that late game, right? Your deck is a mid-range deck that focuses on the later end of the curve, right? You're not really an early game deck. Your early game is basically just using these cards to cycle you into the final board state that you want, which is some amount of Basil Hawkins, 7-drop, 8-drop, and maybe a Yamato, right? Very, very powerful. So why is Sachi here? Now, Sachi's an interesting card because he is a 4K blocker. Forget the rest of his effect. He is a 4K with blocker, right? And why does a 4K blocker matter is because you are going to go ahead and be able to play around Shanks. Now, Shanks cannot be blocked by anything else that's not a Law in your deck, but Sachi can block Shanks, which is kind of cool. And it's something I wanted to mention. There are people that were playing both of the Penguins or the Heart Pirates, and I don't think that's necessarily what you want to do, but they are just cool and something I wanted to mention if you wanted to go play them. For now, goodbye. Then we have Raizo, really big enjoyer of this card. Tertiary Engine. Now we're 4-4-2, and now we're really getting there, and our Wano cards are becoming more and more favorable. Now, Beppo, he's a card that he's good, but he has to be hard drawn to be good, right? It's a card that you must draw in order to get that 2K. He's not really searchable, and 2Ks are very powerful, but if you're going to play a 2K that you want to not search, you can just play Paradise Waterfall, and that's where the argument for Beppo kind of dies, right? He's a cool card because he's a 2K. You can add more 2Ks into your deck, which the deck kind of has a lot of bricks. But if you're going to do that, just play Waterfall. Its effect in life is insane. Its effect in hand is insane. It's just, there's no way we'd not playing Waterfall as opposed to Beppo. Okiku, I will drop her down to 2 for now because the fact that she is an insanely powerful card, but the no combo power, it is searchable. Its stat line is fantastic and its effect is amazing, but maybe not a 4 of. I do really also like this X-Drake. X-Drake, I know people are going to say, starter deck, homie. Well, This guy, in conjunction with a lot of your cards, your Basil Hawkins, your 7-drops, your leader even, maybe he's kind of like a Zoro for the green deck, which is really, really weird, right? This is a card that almost always needs to be jet pistoled. His stat line is insane. He is searchable. I think there is something to be said about X-Drake, and maybe if people aren't playing him, that's okay. He is a little bit slower, and I understand that. But the way that he interacts with your deck, having a Zoro for green, seems very, very powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and put him to 2 again for now. We'll leave the 1 of. I am not a fan of this X-Drake. I'm going to leave this at 3 as we talked about earlier. Leave this at 2. I do like this card more than I like this card. I do not like Straw Sword. And this is kind of where we're at this moment. Right now, we're at 50 cards. Ooh, we're going to have to start making some cuts. Unfortunately, some cards just don't make it into the final run through, right? So I like X-Drake, but X-Drake kind of, if you want to play killer, then you can't play X-Drake, in my opinion, right? You can do both. I think the deck is very solid as it is, but the changes is one of these has to go to make room for Okiku as well as Yamato. And that really depends on what you want to do with your deck, as well as the killers. So if you want to go ahead and play this 4-drop, which is a more of a late game card for your deck, and you want to really beat the mirror, you have this X-Drake. This killer is more of a mid-range card that allows you to get to your late game and beat the more aggressive decks as Law and Red and things like that. This deck should theoretically eat those decks anyways, because you have cards like Punk Gibson, Cat Viper Ezo, and Basil Hawkins that are just going to make those matchups almost trivial. But if you wanted to just really bulk up on those matchups, you'll go here. If you want to bulk up on the green matchup, you will go here, right? This card plus a 7-drop. This board state is very powerful versus purple versus green versus blue. Just those 2 cards are an immediate answer, must be answered, or the game will just end, right? And that's why I do want to play 3 of this and 2 of this, because I don't want my deck to win via the Eustass Captain Kit. I want my 7-drop to be my winner, not my 8-drop. But let's say we want to not play the X-Drake, and we want to, because this is a little out there, right? I don't want to keep being out there and everyone just flame me and say that my lists are bad. So I'm going to remove X-Drake for now. With that, we can immediately up the killers up by 2. And then by playing these 2 killers, we're fine. And let's say you don't want to play Yamato, you want to make your deck more consistent, you'll go ahead and go up the Okiku. And then now we have a list that's a little bit more centered around the end, right? Maybe if you don't like Punk Gibson, you can drop it, but I beg to argue that the effect in life, the trigger, is just as strong as Red Hawk's. One of the more game-breaking triggers in life. Its effect is really, really good in the mirror. If you can activate this card and have a Basil Hawkins on the board, you basically are creating another activator, another Cat Viper, another Ezo versus Law. This is insane. Versus Red, this is insane. This card is very good versus green. I just don't see a matchup where this card is bad, except maybe purple, but sometimes this card lets you squeeze in a rest of a blocker that then lets you win the game as well. So I really am just an enjoyer of this card. The only card that I'm not a big fan of is Killer. But again, I get it. I get it. I think it's very okay, in my opinion. Actually, let's just say we're playing it. I mean, I like the killer here. So this is one of the versions of the deck. But if you want it to be a little bit greedier, which you know I love to be, this would be the way you take it all the way, right? This would be the 50 cards that you can make that green list to say, I am winning the green matchup and I'm going to beat your deck. Either that or you can play the X-Drakes. And this is kind of where I would find a final landing point for green at this time. If you don't want to play the 4 Punk Gibsons, go ahead and up the Okiku to 4, and now we have a great deck. Now we have 20 Wano, 31 Supernovas. We have actually increased our ratios with both of these cards and have also made our deck just a little bit stronger in the late game. As much as Basil Hawkins sucks versus specific matchups, this card is... I'm starting to become under the impression it's one of the best cards in the game. Versus Law, this card is insane. If they don't have the Jet Pistol, you lose. If if you can board the Basil into green before green can do it, and they don't have like Straw Sword, which is in my opinion a very sacky and terrible card, then you automatically win. And the Basil Hawkins will just win you the game by itself. They cannot board the 8-drop into a Basil Hawkins. If they have no life, Basil Hawkins, and they have blockers, Basil Hawkins just goes for game, and then they have to block, he restands, he goes for game again, they have to block, and then your leader takes it away. It just kind of does what your deck wants to do. This card is insane. It is searchable. And because of that, you might say, well, since it's searchable, we can drop it down. And then if you do that, you can up some other points, right? Which is absolutely fine. But once again, I think this card is too important not to play. I think this card wins you more matchups than he loses. And if it's not necessary in the matchup, which again, he's good versus red, good versus green, good versus Law, good versus blue. He's just not great versus purple. And I'm kind of down with that. We have other cards that are just absolutely really, really good versus purple, such as this Captain Kid and things like that. You can really swing the board into purple very many times. And the idea is you have to switch your game plan in general versus purple. If I was going to go ahead and play green, I would suggest you guys go in that OPTCG sim and just grind matches of this versus purple so you can find the win conditions. Using his ability early is very, very good. And as always, swinging for 5 is what you want to do with them, or 7, right? Those are the real numbers. 5, 7, and 9 are the numbers you want to hit. 7 says, give me 2 cards or give me a spell. 5 says, give me a card. And 9 says, you're going to eat this, right? Those are the numbers that you want to go ahead and look at when you swing. Very, very important. Always be 2k ahead of the card you're trying to kill, just to say, I need 2 cards or an event. Or if you want to just take cards out of the hand, hit them for evens. I know that was a lot. I said a lot in very little time, but if you go ahead and think about what I just said, it might help you a lot with your further games and further analysis. So with that being said, I don't think I'm going to go any further on this green list. I think this is perfection. I think green is just an absolute monster. You might lose some games. It's not an unbeatable deck. It's not tier 0, you know, but it definitely is consistent. It's very, very strong, and it kind of like removes a couple decks from the formats, right? These hyper aggressive red decks, this deck should take care of no problem, right? If you play the killer version, you should be even more fine, right? You just cut this and play the 2-3 drop killers, and you should be absolutely fine, because when they go ahead and they board that Zoro, they defend the Zoro, and then you're like, killer the Zoro, and then they've lost the game, right? You can also drop some of these killers if you don't want to play them, but then again, that doesn't facilitate your A-drop game plan, which is fine. You don't have to win with the A-drop. You can then play Yamatos and things along those lines to really take control of the board. So you beat the hyper-aggressive decks, you auto-beat blue. You just have to really control yourself in how to beat the mirror, and that's why I've built this version to beat the mirror, because the 7 and the 5 really are the beasts. And then once again, you know, make your purple matchup concrete. Sometimes purple loses it to itself, and sometimes purple is just unlosable. Like the deck actually can't lose, which is unfortunate, right? But that's the variance that we have in card games, and hopefully throughout 9 rounds, that variance doesn't make its way to you. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about this deck and how we can improve it, let's improve it together. Leave a comment down below and I will go ahead and respond to anything that you like. Do you like the deck? Do you hate the deck? Let's talk about it. And as always, if you guys are enjoying the content that I'm providing, go ahead and make sure to subscribe and join our pirate crew today. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.